Welcome back. You're watching HFO-TV.
Welcome back to HFO-TV. I'm Greg Frick, partner at HFO Investment Real Estate. Today we have Gwenn Baldwin, president of Baldwin Consulting Company. She represents clients in helping with the positioning and government relations, and she's also represented Multifamily Northwest for more than 15 years. 15 years in terms of lobbying, in terms for the benefit of multifamily owners. Thanks for coming.
Happy to be here.
I know we've had a very, how to say this, interesting time in the last couple of years in terms of policies statewide and local. Maybe you could give an update on what's kind of happened in the last 12 months, and then we can talk a little bit about where we're going and kind of things that we're seeing on the legislative side.
Sure. I mean, I think after probably decades of, if you will, sort of almost benign indifference to housing dynamics and housing needs, suddenly housing is on everyone's lips. Right. It's on the forefront. And that can be a good thing or that can be a not good thing, depending on where we are. And right now, with the market so underserving the demand, this is not a healthy place to be, I think, in terms of the market itself, but particularly in terms of policymaking. People who are decision makers are feeling a sense of urgency. They're feeling a sense of uncertainty and frustration. They don't know, they are not comfortable with the ways to address the market side, so they're addressing what they can or they see they can address, which is the political side. And the challenge with that, obviously, is if you're making long-term policy changes for short-term market dynamics, you run into trouble. Lots of unintended consequences and lots of issues. But I think we have to start from the frame of this is an incredibly overheated market, and there are some people out there who are really facing real challenges. It is not a sustainable situation to have a rental market where people are spending 50+% of their income. So not easy to address, but there are some things that I think could be done better and could be done with more focus on providing more affordability in the housing market.
So is that more based on the state level or is that more on the city level? I know the city of Portland, and they've a state of emergency for affordability housing. I know that they're doing some state things around. The senators were in town the last couple of days and doing those. So is this on both sides? Maybe give a little breakdown on.
It's really both sides. There are some things within that are really in the state purview. Obviously, they have access to certain types of funding. They allow certain types of abatements. For example, you have to provide the permission at the state level and then enact it at the local level. Tax credits, those types of things are all at the state level. Certainly land use and land use policy is at the state level, although again, it gets enacted at the local level. Okay. So it's really, it's two parts of an equation. You have to have both. And the solutions really are both. But right now where I see a lot of the need to speed up product coming into the ground and into the market is really at the local level. If it takes 18 months to get a project approved when you've got affordable units that you're trying to put in the ground in addition to market rate, that's a problem. And so as we look at what is happening in Portland and other communities, I think that's a place to spend time communicating with elected officials and communicating with other owners about what the barriers are, what the barriers are to building and getting things in the ground. Because the truth of the matter is it doesn't matter what the price tag is of the product. More product means a better match between supply and demand. And that ultimately is what is going to create a healthy long-term market.
Right, and we've kind of been saying this for the last year. It's not it's a supply issue, the demand issues here. We don't have a lot of control over the demand issue. I mean, we've got, it's a great place to live. People love living here. We've got immigration. I think that's been the big surprise. I think that took a lot of people back in our market is the amount of immigration that came. We knew we were hot. We didn't realize we were this hot. Development hasn't been able to catch up. So you have this inequality, and that's where we've got, raising rents and things like that. Does on the policy side, do they understand the terms of, it almost seems like sometimes they're working more on the demand side and not the supply side? And is that's the feeling and that's the feedback we get from a lot of owners, developers. How do you address the demand side? In Portland in particular, we've got an urban growth boundary. First time they have an expanded urban growth boundary. In the 20-something years, they do it every 6 years. We have more immigration than we've ever seen. That part, I understand some of it, but it didn't really make sense. How do we kind of change the dynamic in that
It's really
way?
the consistency. I mean, there's an argument to be made for why you have an urban growth boundary. Whether you agree or disagree, at least see it through to the end of the logic.
Yes.
So for example, and we've seen a lot in media coverage recently of folks who are not interested in having increased density in their neighborhoods.
Right.
Don't change it. This is the way it's always been. This is the way we like it. And that all density should be in very narrow, constrained areas. Well, okay, but if you subscribe to that, then basically you're not allowing that density to happen. Where are folks going to go?
Exactly.
I mean, if you're not allowing up and you're not allowing out, you've kind of put a kibosh on meeting that demand. So I think that policymakers are going to have to make some tougher decisions about having more flexibility and more speed in approving more development inside the core. Because without that, then all they're doing is exacerbating the problem.
Right.
And I think putting a bright light on that is important. I mean, I'll give you an example. If you go through design review in the city of Portland, that can take a very long time.
Oh, yeah.
A very long time. And yet, earlier this month, City Council adopted an ordinance that would allow a quicker and a less expensive design review option, a Type 2X. From Type 3s would go to Type 2X. Now, that's a great place to start. For affordable housing, but that's not, we have a situation that is so hot, we need more than that, bigger and better, I would say.
Right.
There needs to be not only a decrease in the fees and the costs for this, which the Type 2X does, but simply reducing the amount of review time average by 10 days seems like we haven't pushed it far enough.
Right.
We haven't done it. People should be able to, if they've got particularly a more affordable product, because that's where people are really feeling the pinch right now in the community. I mean, that should be approved within 6 weeks, 6 months at the outside. Get the product in the ground. Everyone will be better served. Renters who are looking for us, a unit will be better served, the market will be better served, costs will be better served. So I think part of that is putting a bright spotlight on what are the ways we can remove the barriers to more product being built at all ranges of affordability.
And is that spotlight being put on that, or it seems like are we having to educate in terms of that's where maybe a different way to look at it as opposed to just looking at the supply, not the demand side on restricting demands. I mean, that's the kind of the shift, and we've talked to a lot of owners about this, that we have to get this message out, because if you don't get this out, this is what's going to happen. It's much easier to make changes on the the demand side as opposed to the supply side.
Yeah, it's not a one-shot deal. It's constant. I mean, everybody knows a policymaker, or everybody knows a neighbor who potentially knows one. What's your waiting in line for a cup of coffee? What's your going in and seeing somebody in the aisles of a hardware store? Constantly having that conversation about what would be helpful, I think, makes a difference. One of the things that have been talked about for some time was some of the limitations in zoning. And again, we'll use Portland as an example since we're here.
It seems to be the hotbed of this.
And it seems to be the hotbed of a lot of this, although it's happening other places. Medford has got issues, Bend has issues, coastal areas have issues, and they're all slightly different, but people are looking for more. And I think that if you're paying attention to what's been coming up in the comprehensive plan, in the new sort of, if you will, roadmap for development, I mean, one of the things that I think is reflective of some education is people are now talking about that missing middle. Right. That sort of 80 to 120 median family income product. Well, some of that doesn't get built unless you have the ability to do garden units or be able to do smaller plexes or infill in areas. If the zoning
or your newer construction today becomes that product 3 years down the road. Exactly.
If you don't have a broad multi-sector pipeline and you're not feeding it because the zoning won't allow you to feed it, then you're creating, in part, your own problem.
Right.
So how do we clear those barriers out? And it was really encouraging, I think, that Commissioner Novick and some others have talked about that missing middle. Let's change the zoning to better reflect that. But there's pushback, as we also see. Right. And ultimately, people have to make that choice. If they care more about sort of keeping everything the same and not changing than they do about affordability, then they can continue down the current path. If they care more about affordability and getting that sort of breadth of different rates and rents in the Portland market, then they're going to have to make different choices.
And I sometimes wonder, is it even framed in terms of affordability? I don't even know if it's a question of affordability. I almost think it's a question of maybe progress. You're going to, I mean, you have all these people moving to here. We would love, everybody likes to say, I don't want urban sprawl, but I don't want density in my neighborhood. You can't have both.
Can't have both.
You can't have affordability without some kind of, again, supply economics to move those up. You know, it's, as I've said to somebody, it doesn't have to do with affordable housing or not. Where are you going to put everybody? You have to. Things are going to change. I mean, that's just the way it is. If you want to, if you're not growing, you're dying, and that's from a city standpoint. We are changing. So I sometimes wonder, and we've had conversations with other owners about that. It's not really even what your own thing is about affordability or not. It's really, you're going to change. You have to increase housing because of the migration in here. And it's a funny conversation because, well, here on the political side, it's all, you know, rent control and things like that. Once you hear those things, owners are going, you know, and then on the other side, it's supply constraints. So it's how do you find that balance and how do we educate, you know, really both sides to say, to move this forward into a beneficial thing for both.
Well, and I think it's repetition. Yes, affordability is a loaded word. People, you know, assume that it either means very, very, very low income, you know, homeless services, and some people are like, well, affordability for me is, you know, getting something that's, you know, $2,000 a month. And that's the reality of it. Affordability is a scale. Everybody's, you know, are you making good wages? Is your salary robust? We have economic opportunity. It's a much bigger picture. Right. But at the end of the day, if there are systemic barriers, if the zoning doesn't work, if the approval process doesn't work, if the money isn't there to help create the product that is simply unaffordable. I mean, if somebody is trying to provide product that meets a 0 to 30 median family income, it is impossible to do without significant public resources.
Definitely.
So let's acknowledge that and then leverage it. I mean, I look at something like the multi-program in Portland. That was unworkable and unusable just a few years ago, and now they're going to be maxing out the $3 million that they have approved.
Right.
So it is eminently doable. You can get good results if you make it a workable, realistic product.
And on the policy side, is that coming around in terms of,
Oh gosh.
I don't want to put you in a tough position, but that's kind of the question.
Well, it is. It's an evolution. Right. I think that just as people who are policymakers who sit down and talk to renters and hear their stories and their heartbreaking stories about the challenges that they face in terms of the economics of this market, more people, more elected officials need to get into apartment complexes and multifamily complexes to understand what it means to operate and run a safe, healthy, vibrant community. And I think, you know, certainly members within Multifamily Northwest and members within HFO provide that. You know, it's about quality rental housing. Nobody is in the business of providing, you know, crummy product. Right. It's a matter of pride and it's a matter of business. Doesn't make sense. And so blending those two pieces of education, getting people, you know, inviting them into your complexes, you know, having them over and walking through so they understand what it means to operate and run it, right. I think is incredibly important. And that's a relationship at a time and a person at a time.
And I think trying to have them understand the demand side in terms of, you know, we get asked a lot about, you know, there's all the stories in the paper about this house being, you know, or the house or building being renovated and people moving out, and, you know, what do you do with those tenants? I understand that as an issue, and we need to figure out a way to make that work. And then on the flip side, what do you do with the 20 people that are calling in, moving to town, and can't find a place to live? That's not a question of affordability; it's a question of supply.
It is totally a question of supply.
And so it's trying to get this together, and then, you know, trying to get people, you know, you got a very diverse group of owners, tenants, business, and how do you kind of get something that's good for the city long term? There may be some short term pain, but long term we've got to move this thing forward.
Right. I mean, if you look at places like, you know, like Seattle, I mean, they're about a couple of years ahead of us in terms of supply. They're starting to see rents come down, not just the rate of growth increase, but actually rents coming down. And while that's not necessarily, you know, something that everyone wants to see, nobody wants to see that crash in terms of rents coming down. Having a more balanced, healthy market that can sustain itself going forward is great. So if we're a couple of years behind in terms of development, that means we've got a couple of years that we, you know, are going to be in this challenging place, both market-wise and politically. And so I think our energy has to be on how do we shrink that gap, how do we shrink that time frame so that we get more product in faster, but that we also can explain and aim our policy making in that short term, where we triaging. If folks are having difficulty paying rent, if they're oversubscribed, they're at 50, 70% of their income is going to rent, then having a supply of being able to tie people over for 1 or 2 months, funds from the state or from the local government is really important. And that was one of the things that came out of this last session, was there's $8 million that was authorized for rental assistance. So if somebody runs into a problem for 1 or 2 months.
But is that getting out though? Is it?
It just got approved, so
okay.
We're talking about a matter of weeks, and hopefully that's the other piece, is we also have $42.5 million in new housing development. And that's for the very low income product. How quickly can that get out? If it takes 24 months or 36 months to get that product out, then it's not helping address and shrink that window. So certainly that's a message that we've been delivering to the governor's office and to Oregon Housing Community Services, is what can we do to get that out? And my understanding is that the RFPs for that are going to be going out in a month or 2.
And how do you address, in terms of we started talking about building affordable housing, state-run or city-run or things like that, the added cost? And I mean, there are numbers thrown around on some of the things being built. Would those funds be better used in doing a private-public partnership on existing housing to make it affordable? I mean, that's something I get asked all the time about developers. I mean, look how many units they built, the cost for those units, and it's such a small number. Would we have been better off to, retrofit all these Class B, C buildings with new windows, make them affordable, do some kind of credit that way? So always, we kind of run into that question as well. Everybody has their own agenda in terms of what they want to do, but.
Well, clearly, I mean, the private sector is really exceptional at doing what they do, which is building apartments, building multifamily, building houses. We do that really well. There are certain things that don't necessarily pencil out unless the public sector is a partner. Again, very, very affordable. And when I talk about affordable housing, I'm talking about housing affordability. What makes housing affordable at all levels of income? But at the very low income, that's got to be a public partnership. Now, some of that is housing preservation. Say there are folks who are project-based housing and it's been affordable and it's coming due. If the state's in a position to be able to communicate with that owner and extend that, that's great, re-up it. If the owner's looking to sell, is the state in a position to buy that property so that it maintains its affordable rent? That's a great option. I think that the sort of least good option is when the state or the local governments are in a position to actually build, because we do it better in the private sector. So how do we get a situation where we can help take those dollars and leverage it?
Wasn't the city's last deal that they wanted to have ownership? And did I not see that right? Where they wanted to do affordable housing for the lower, I think 30 and below median, but they wanted to make sure they were in the ownership position.
Well, it depends, again, on what the level of public dollars are. Again, if you're talking about 0 to 30, I think that's such a unique, unusual product, and they have to have so much money into that I can understand why they would want more ownership position or more control in that. But if we're talking about, again, the breadth of stuff, let me use an example. The city of Denver has been developing an arrangement, a partnership with the private sector multifamily universe to take something like a multi-program and see where they can match up with willing private sector owners for existing product. So it's sort of like, I would like to buy 10 of your units. I would like to buy the affordability of those 10 units. So it's got to be a willing partnership. The owner has to be interested in it. The city has to say, I want to have those units in that building, so it's not outweigh in an inaccessible location. And that to me sounds like a much better way to get much faster affordability into the marketplace, to sort of provide that subsidy, than it would be to spend years building up a kitty, if you will, to try to build housing. So these are the types of things that we're trying to encourage not only Portland and Multnomah County, but places all around the state to consider.
And are they open to that, or is it?
Yeah, actually, interestingly.
Okay.
So I think part of this is then you have to look at the risk factor involved and how, what sort of, surety is in the program, so that it really is a workable partnership on both sides. But you look at the success that we had, for example, when the veterans vouchers were in play, and they were trying to make sure that we had homeless veterans housed as quickly as possible.
Right.
And Multifamily Northwest worked very hard on that, and individual members were sort of at the call. You had vouchers, you had support funding and systems to the county. How do you match up the veteran in need, the resources that are available with an available unit? And so they would literally, contact and say, we've got this type of circumstance, do you have a unit available? And there were, willing owners who were like, yes, I've got one, I'm willing to hold it for a day or two, get your person in.
Right.
And it worked really, it was incredibly successful. We're now having conversations about that same sort of dynamic, again, with existing resources, state and federal and local, that are out there, willing owners and homeless students. Because if children can stay in their school district and stay in their school, they're going to be much better off. But if somebody loses their income or loses their apartment, or whatever that reason is, there's got to be a system that is set up to be able to work quickly and make the most of that. So these are all conversations we're having. Frankly, I wish they were happening faster. But at least I think there's an openness that I haven't seen before, and that's very encouraging.
From the legislative side, an openness to going to a program
from
like
the
that?
policymaker side, and some of that's local. But I think there's also a recognition that the budget is probably one of the biggest ways that you say what your priorities are.
Right.
And for years and years, housing has not been in the budget.
Right.
It just simply hasn't.
And then what about? The other one is we'll hear is rent control.
Rent control.
I know you hear that. It's everybody has their own reaction when they hear that. It's it almost seems like, again, it's not addressing these other programs, a density bonus, things like that encourage it, as opposed to rent. Everybody says we don't want to end up like San Francisco. Went down that path. Sounds like Denver and Seattle kind of have a different track of going on there. Is that something that's trying to be? You try to educate the legislatures and the municipalities in terms of option A, option B. How do we? Absolutely.
The thing is, you have to understand where rent control comes from is frustration.
Oh yeah, definitely.
And some of it's philosophical. There are folks out there who believe it is the best thing in the universe, and I would respectfully disagree. I don't think it actually produces the result that people, even those who support it, state that it will do. The truth of the matter is that it only helps somebody who's specifically in that unit for as long as they're a unit.
Small percentage of people.
Small percentage of the people, and it increases the cost for everybody else. And the good news is that is, I think, a reality that is understood by most policymakers.
Okay.
But what they are saying is then give me an alternative. And that's where we redirect them to. The alternative is get product built faster, remove the barriers, and look at how we can leverage support to help stabilize renting so that people aren't bouncing around as much. And if that's 1 or 2 months rent, then let's have the system in place to do that. If that's getting owners matched up with existing subsidies and financing, then let's do that. But I think that it's at this point, I would not say that there is a significant appetite, except within a sort of a highly activist universe for rent control. But that's obviously something we pay a lot of attention to.
Well, the squeaky wheel gets the grease, so that's what you see in the press. That's what we talk about that even in our business. Everybody wants to talk about what's going on downtown. There's a whole other world outside of the core. So, we address housing downtown. Are you addressing workforce housing in Gresham, Beaverton, Hillsborough? There's a whole. So I know it's the nice thing, it's a headline, but there's other issues. So for owners, a lot of people watch this. If they want to get more information, where can they go to, maybe give ideas, look at partnering up, different feedback? Where would they go for that?
Sure. Well, Multifamily Northwest has a terrific website with lots of information on it, lots of ways to get involved. There are a number of committees, from government affairs to education, and even forms. How we communicate to the members, how we communicate to our legislators and other policymakers is really important. And having direct voice and direct communication from the owners and the managers of property is huge. So I would definitely say your first stop should be Multifamily Northwest and their website.
Okay. Well, thanks again for coming. It was a great, very enlightening. And for the owners out there, as we've talked about, it was a short session in 2016. It's going to be a long session in 2017. If there's questions, we need to start looking at getting together and doing that now. Like I said, Multifamily Northwest is a great place to start. Again, this is very during the time we've had a lot of growth. There's a lot of opinions out there. But again, the key, I think, is trying not to make short-term solutions for things that are going to affect long-term, and that's been the biggest concern. But if you don't have your voice, nobody hears it. The loudest voice is going to get, it's going to be have a better ability to drive policy. So that's what we got to watch out for. So thank you again.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Our entire office specializes in multifamily real estate, making HFO the largest multifamily brokerage in the Pacific Northwest. Your success is our passion. Build your legacy with HFO. Call 503-241-5541 or visit our website at hfore.com for more information.